She was a young, devoted teacher, kind, fearless, and new to town. But one morning in a crowded school hallway, a student raised a bat. What happened next shocked the district. A silent janitor caught the swing mid-air and changed everything. But no one knew he was a former Navy SEAL. And when her powerful mother found out who saved her daughter, she didn't just thank him. She tore the school apart. The hallway buzzed with the last echo of the lunch bell. Lockers slammed, sneakers squeaked, and a dozen voices clashed in a chaos of teen chatter and hallway drama. Somewhere near the east stairwell, a group of students broke into laughter, not the friendly kind, but sharp, mocking. Claire Dawson tightened her grip on her clipboard. It was her 3rd month teaching 8th grade at Waverly Middle, and though her soft-spoken style had won over most of her students, there was one corner of the school that remained resistant, rotten even. And at the center of it stood a towering 14-year-old with a linebacker's frame and a politician's smirk, Blake Simmons. Miss Dawson Blake sneered, stepping into her path with his arms folded. "You forget your coloring book today." His posse erupted in snickers. Claire stood her ground, chin up, heart thudding. She had reported him twice, but Principal Benson had brushed it aside. "Blake's father is a donor," he had said once, almost apologetically. "We need to be careful how we handle him." Today, Claire wasn't going to back down. "Step aside, Blake," she said firmly. "You're blocking the hallway." "Oh, are we?" he mocked, then leaned in close, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You think you can humiliate me in front of the class and get away with it? See me after school. Right. That's your power move." Claire didn't flinch, though a flash of fear passed through her chest. Before she could respond, a small voice cut through the tension. "Leave her alone, Blake." The group turned. Standing at the edge of the crowd holding a stack of books, too big for his slight frame, was Brady Cole, 12 years old. Sharp eyes and courage burning brighter than his size allowed. His voice trembled, but he didn't step back. Claire's heart twisted. Brady was one of her brightest students, quiet, kind, fiercely protective, and he was about to become a target. Blake's smile darkened. "Oh, look, the teacher's little pet." He reached over and slapped the books from Brady's arms. They scattered across the floor. Brady stared, stunned. Claire stepped forward instantly. "That's enough." But Blake wasn't done. He turned to her with a burst of rage she hadn't seen before. "You don't tell me what's enough," he roared, and then, as if from nowhere, he reached into his gym bag and pulled out a metal baseball bat. Gasps rang out. A few students backed away. Others fumbled for their phones. But no one moved fast enough. Blake raised the bat eye's wild teeth clenched and brought it down in a blinding arc toward Claire. And then, clang, the bat stopped mid-swing, caught by a single hand. Gasps turned to silence. A heavy stillness filled the hallway, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Standing between Claire and Blake was a man. Tall, broad-shouldered, sun-weathered skin. Long hair pulled back. His face was calm, unreadable, but his grip on the bat was iron. The crowd parted instinctively as students realized who it was. Dylan Cole, the night security guard. Quiet. Mysterious. The man who swept floors after hours and disappeared before dawn. Now he stood like a statue carved from war, his eyes locked on Blake's. "Drop it," Dylan said quietly. Blake tried to jerk the bat free, but it didn't budge. Dylan's other hand moved lightning quick, and in one seamless motion, he spun Blake around, twisted the weapon from his grip, and swept his legs out from under him. Blake hit the floor hard with a shocked grunt. The bat clattered to the ground. Dead silence. Claire swayed. Dylan turned just in time to catch her. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed into his arms. He dropped to one knee, holding her gently one hand, cupping the back of her head to keep it from striking the tile. "Call an ambulance," he said. Voice steady. Brady was already dialing. The hallway erupted into chaos. Students shouted. Teachers rushed in. Someone screamed. But Dylan didn't move. He cradled Claire like something fragile, something sacred, his eyes watching every flicker of breath on her lips. Her eyes fluttered open for the briefest second, confused and dazed, and then closed again. The surveillance footage from the hallway made its way to Principal Benson's office. He watched it 3 times, jaw tight, sweat beading beneath his collar. In the video, Blake's bat stopped in midair. Dylan's calm takedown played out like a scene from a war film, fluid, practiced, terrifyingly efficient. And the camera caught Claire's unconscious body, limp in Dylan's arms. Benson cursed under his breath. This wasn't going away quietly. At Riverstone Medical Center, Claire was rushed into a trauma room. Minor skull trauma. Concussion. No internal bleeding, but the attending doctor wanted to keep her overnight. She wouldn't wake up until morning. Brady sat in the waiting room with his knees pulled up to his chest, backpack forgotten at his side. Dylan stood by the window, arms folded, staring out at the darkening sky. He hadn't said a word since giving the statement to police, but something in his expression had shifted. Not panic, not pride. Recognition. Something about Claire's face stirred a memory from years ago, blurred by sand and fire, the smell of gunpowder and the sound of a woman screaming. Outside, the street lamps flickered on. The storm had only just begun. The school security office smelled like stale coffee and silence. Dylan Cole sat with his arms folded, his back straight, his expression unreadable. Across the table, Officer Jennings, local beat cop with a potbelly and a tight haircut, clicked his pen over and over again. "So let me get this straight," Jennings said. "Finally, you disarmed a 14-year-old with a metal bat, knocked him to the ground, and didn't throw a single punch." Dylan looked at him calm as still water. "Didn't need to." Jennings raised an eyebrow. "That kid's got 50 pounds on most adults." He telegraphed his swing, Dylan replied. Feet too wide, hips locked. He was angry, predictable. Jennings blinked. "You a fighter?" "No, sir," Dylan said softly. "I'm a father." A pause. Jennings leaned back, scribbled something into his pad. "Look, I'm not saying I'm not grateful. Hell, half the town's already calling you a hero. But the kid's dad is Councilman Simmons. You know what that means." Dylan nodded once, slow and heavy. It meant politics. It meant cover-ups. It meant that even when a kid tried to assault a teacher in broad daylight, justice came with caveats. "She okay?" Dylan asked. "Concussion. Minor swelling. They've got her under observation at Riverstone." Jennings tapped the side of his head. "Could have been a lot worse." Dylan exhaled quietly. His fingers twitched, once reflexively, then stilled. He didn't want attention, didn't want headlines. But seeing Claire Dawson crumple in his arms, blood trickling from her temple, had shaken something loose inside him. Something he thought he buried a decade ago under metals and sand. Claire floated in a dream where pain wore the face of light. It burned behind her eyes. She tried to speak, but her lips wouldn't move. Shadows moved around her. Machinery beeped in rhythm with her heartbeat. Then, softly, a voice. "I'll come back tomorrow." "Okay, you're safe now." She recognized that voice, warm, steady, familiar in a way she couldn't explain. Brady. Not the boy, his father. The Cole home wasn't much. A modest single-story house at the edge of town with a squeaky porch swing and a yard littered with science fair parts. Inside, Brady Cole sat at the dining table, notebook open but untouched. His math homework blurred before his eyes. He couldn't stop thinking about the moment when the bat was in the air, when Claire froze, when his dad moved like something out of a movie. "Dad," Brady said suddenly, "where'd you learn to do that?" Dylan was in the kitchen rinsing dishes. He didn't answer right away. The water kept running. Dad Dylan shut off the tap. Long time ago, he said, finally drying his hands on a towel. Was it the Navy stuff? Brady asked. Dylan hesitated, then nodded. Something like that. Brady looked down. They said on the news that Blake's dad is rich, that they might try to blame you. Dylan walked over, crouched beside his son. He placed a hand gently on Brady's shoulder. You did the right thing standing up for her, Dylan said. I saw you. I didn't do anything. You're the one who stopped him. You spoke first, Dylan said. That takes guts. Brady looked at his dad, really looked at him, and for the first time realized just how much his father kept hidden behind silence. Claire stirred against stiff pillows. Her head ached dull and deep, beeping monitors, the faint scent of antiseptic. She opened her eyes slowly and saw a white envelope on the bedside table, tucked neatly beside a plastic cup of water. She reached for it with trembling fingers. Inside was a folded piece of notebook paper, childlike handwriting. Dear Miss Dawson, I hope you're okay. You're the best teacher I've ever had. I'm sorry I couldn't stop him faster. Brady Cole. Tears blurred her vision. Brady. Sweet, awkward Brady, who always stayed late to clean up after science class. She clutched the note to her chest, and for a moment, the pain in her skull dulled beneath the warmth in her heart. A nurse entered quietly. You're awake, she smiled. Good. There's someone asking about you in the lobby. Said he's the school night guard. Claire blinked. Dylan. The nurse nodded. Tall guy, bit intense, but polite. Wants to know if you need anything. Claire tried to sit up but winced. Can I see him? The nurse shook her head gently. Visiting hours are strict, but I can give him a message. Claire hesitated. Then she reached for the notepad by her bed. She wrote 2 words. Thank you. Dylan stood alone in the school parking lot under the amber glow of a flickering streetlight. The building was quiet, still taped off at the east hallway under incident review. He looked up at the windows, classrooms dark locked. The silence reminded him of forward bases abandoned after extraction, places where lives had cracked open and ghosts lingered in corridors. He didn't like being remembered for violence. He'd spent 10 years unlearning what the SEALs drilled into him. But today, it had been reflex, protect, shield, neutralize the threat. And yet it wasn't the bat or the boy that haunted him. It was Claire's face, pale, scared, and unconscious in his arms. There was something achingly familiar in her expression, something buried deep. He leaned against the hood of his truck and exhaled. From his jacket pocket, he pulled out the small scrap of paper the nurse had handed him earlier. He unfolded it. Thank you. Just 2 words, but in a world where people turned away, where fear and politics silenced truth, those 2 words carried more weight than 100 medals. Dylan folded the note and slipped it back into his pocket. Tomorrow, he'd return to sweeping floors and watching cameras. But something had shifted. Something that couldn't be undone. The ICU hallway was white sterile and almost too quiet, like the pause between thunderclaps. Dylan Cole stood just outside room 214, the faint hum of monitors leaking through the half-closed door. He didn't step inside. He never did. He'd come 3 days in a row, each time in the early morning, before his shift at the school, when the hospital was still half asleep and less likely to ask questions. He wasn't family. He wasn't staff. He was just a man who had caught a falling soul before her head cracked open on tile. Through the sliver of glass, he could see Claire Dawson lying still beneath a pale blue blanket. Her face was no longer bloodied, but pale, slightly bruised around the temple. A light bandage peeked out from beneath her soft chestnut hair. Tubes, wires, blinking machines. They surrounded her like a fortress of quiet technology, guarding what her own body could not. He hadn't spoken to her since the attack. He wasn't sure what he'd say if he did. Sir. The soft voice startled him. He turned. Brady stood there, holding a small white lunch bag and a book titled Journey to the Center of the Earth, tucked under his arm. "I told the nurse I was family," Brady whispered. Dylan blinked. "You're not." Brady shrugged. "I didn't say whose family." Dylan sighed, but a faint flicker of amusement ghosted across his face. "You skipped school again." Brady looked down. Mr. Benson said, "Miss Dawson's gonna be out for a while. No substitute yet." "And I wanted to bring her something." Dylan studied his son. 12 years old. Honest, to a fault. Brave, without knowing it. "All right," Dylan said quietly. 5 minutes. Brady pushed the door open slowly, like entering a cathedral. Inside, the steady rhythm of the heart monitor pulsed like a quiet metronome. Claire didn't stir, but her breathing was easier now, less strained. Brady tiptoed over to her bedside. He placed the lunch bag down on the table, then opened his book and pulled out a folded paper. It was a handwritten letter. He placed it gently beside her hand. "Miss Dawson," he said softly, "I brought you my favorite sandwich. And I finished the book you lent me. I wrote you a summary. I know you always said, a good reader leaves a trail. So, here's mine." He lingered a moment longer. Then he backed away, eyes shimmering. Beatrice Dawson stood beside her daughter's hospital bed, with the poise of a woman used to controlling boardrooms, not IV machines. Her hair, usually swept into a perfect French twist, was now clipped loosely at her neck. She wore no makeup. Her expression was unreadable. The room was dark except for the glow of the monitors. She touched Claire's hand gently. "You always had to do things your own way," she whispered, eyes fixed on her daughter's sleeping face. "Teaching in public schools, living alone, not taking my money." She sighed. "I never said it out loud, Claire, but I was proud of you. Still am." She looked around the room, saw the letter on the bedside, the sandwich bag, the drawing of a stegosaurus in crayon tucked underneath. Beatrice smiled faintly, and then she saw the name signed at the bottom of the letter. Brady Cole. Her breath caught. She sat down slowly in the chair beside the bed, eyes narrowing. Cole. She whispered it like the name of a ghost, a burning marketplace. Screams. Dust choking the air. Gunfire in the distance. Beatrice was 27 then, on a trade delegation tour in Eastern Europe, before she'd built her fortune, before the world knew her name. She'd been pulled from a burning jeep by a soldier with blood down his side and a voice like gravel soaked in honey. "Stay down," he'd shouted, shielding her with his body. She remembered his face just before the explosion, the scar on his brow, his name tag, D. Cole. And then he vanished. She'd searched for him, even hired investigators, but he was never found. Until now. Beatrice rose slowly, her eyes locked on the crayon drawing signed in the bottom corner. "To Miss Dawson, from Brady and Dad." Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled out her phone. She tapped a number she hadn't used in years. "Marcus," she said when it connected. "I need you to find someone for me. His name is Dylan Cole. Former Navy SEAL. Works at Waverly Middle School. I want everything." A pause. And Marcus, her voice dropped more steel than silk, no one can know. Dylan sat in his uniform, the muted gray and navy security jacket wrinkled from a long shift. He leaned back in a creaking chair, flipping through the janitor's logbook, but his mind wasn't on light bulb replacements or hallway cameras. It was still in room 2 Martine. He remembered the softness of Claire's weight in his arms, the way her breath fluttered, then paused, the faint scent of lavender and chalk on her blouse. It had been instinct what he did, but it hadn't felt like instinct. It felt like something deeper. Protecting her hadn't been duty. It had been personal. Claire opened her eyes to the sound of rain tapping gently against the window. Her head throbbed, but the fog was lifting. Shapes began to make sense again. She turned and saw a vase of flowers. Lilacs. a book, and a letter. She reached for it. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded it. You don't remember me, but I remember the girl who stood in front of a boy twice her size and said, "That's enough. You're brave, Claire. Rest now. We'll hold the line until you're back." DC, she blinked back tears. In the hallway beyond her room, two men walked past discussing school security. Claire didn't hear them. She was staring at the initials on the note, her heart pounding in her chest. D. Cole. The same name her mother whispered in her sleep. The same man in the photo framed and hidden in her mother's drawer. The man who once saved Beatrice Dawson's life. And just saved hers. The morning Claire Dawson returned to school, the sun rose behind thick clouds, like even the sky wasn't sure if it should smile or weep. Her footsteps echoed down the tiled hallway softer than before. The rhythmic click of her low heels, once confident, now carried a whisper of hesitation. Her head still throbbed occasionally, and the side of her face bore the fading bruise of the impact. But she walked tall. Every door she passed paused. A student peeking out, a teacher glancing up from their desk. Some nodded respectfully. Some looked away unsure. She wasn't sure what was worse, being ignored or being pitied. In her classroom, the lights were already on. Neat rows of desks, a faint scent of dry erase markers and pencil shavings. But there in the center of her desk stood a small, carefully folded paper dinosaur. A stegosaurus, yellow construction paper, a little wobbly. Next to it, a note in that unmistakably eager handwriting. "Miss Dawson, I'm glad you're back. I missed your jokes. I watered the class plants every day. Love, Brady." Claire smiled, and for the first time in days, it didn't hurt. She sat slowly, her hand brushing the stegosaurus like it was made of glass. "Are you sure you're okay to be back already?" asked Ms. Reynolds, the biology teacher, as she poured lukewarm coffee into a paper cup. Claire nodded. "I need to be here. For the kids. For myself." Reynolds lowered her voice. "There's been talk about what happened." "Let them talk," Claire replied. She glanced out the lounge window and spotted Dylan crossing the courtyard in his security jacket carrying a toolbox. Still silent, still solitary. But his presence now pulled at something inside her like gravity with a familiar scent. She turned back to Reynolds, and Blake Reynolds stiffened. Back in class, no charges filed. Claire's grip tightened on her cup. "You're kidding." Principal Benson said, "No proof of intent to cause harm." Claims it was an accident. Claire leaned back in her chair, heart pounding. An accident. Her skull still ached from the so-called accident. She'd nearly died. And Blake, he was back to smirking in the hallway like nothing ever happened. The Dawson family estate sat high on a hill, wrapped in glass steel and clean lines. But inside, beneath the marble and muted tones, tension lived in the silence. Claire stepped through the double doors into the foyer, where her mother was seated on a cream leather sofa reading a dossier. "You're early," Beatrice said without looking up. Claire walked toward her, noting the open folder. Inside, clipped neatly, was a photo of Dylan Cole. Younger, in uniform, seal insignia visible, a scar above his brow. Her mother closed the folder slowly. "You remember him now?" Beatrice asked. Claire hesitated. "I don't remember meeting him, but I remember the man who caught me before I hit the ground." Beatrice exhaled. His name came up after the incident. I ran it through my old files. "He's the one." Claire sat. "The one who saved you in Europe?" Beatrice nodded and disappeared afterward. "No medals? No records?" I assumed he died in service. Claire was quiet for a long moment. "Then he's Brady's father." Beatrice blinked, lips parting. "You've spoken to him." Claire shook her head. Not directly, just a note. "And his actions?" Beatrice leaned back, her posture still perfect, but her voice softer than usual. "I owe that man my life, and now so do you." Claire stood near the edge of the courtyard, watching students filter through the gates. Her gaze instinctively found Brady backpack slung crooked over one shoulder, glasses fogged slightly from the morning chill. But she wasn't the only one watching him. From across the lawn, Blake Simmons leaned against a tree, arms crossed, flanked by two of his usual followers. He didn't move, didn't speak, just watched Claire like she was a puzzle he hadn't finished breaking. Dylan appeared beside her without a sound. Claire didn't jump, but she did glance sideways. "I'm fine," she said. Dylan didn't answer. "Thank you," she added after a beat. Still, he didn't reply. But when she turned to face him fully, she noticed something. Not in his posture, not in his face, his hand. It was clenched, tightly. "I won't let him near you again," Dylan said, finally, voice quiet but unshakable. Claire swallowed. "I'm not afraid of him. You should be," Dylan said, "because he's not acting alone anymore." She frowned. "What do you mean?" Dylan looked toward the administration building. His father's been seen on campus twice. No appointments, just observing. Claire's stomach sank. Councilman Simmons, political clout, legal shields, and a son who thought violence was a birthright. The final bell rang. Desks emptied, backpacks zipped. Laughter faded into the hallway. Brady lingered near her desk, tapping his pencil. "Miss Dawson, can I ask you something?" She nodded. "Did you get scared?" Claire paused. "Yes." "But you still came back. I had to." Why, she looked at him and smiled. "Because you did. Because you showed up every day. Because kindness doesn't get a day off." Brady's eyes welled, but he blinked fast, trying to hide it. "My dad says people like you change schools," he said. Claire tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "He says schools don't get better with rules. They get better with people who show up anyway." She was quiet for a long time. Then she crouched beside him, meeting his gaze. "You tell your dad he's right." Beatrice Dawson stood at her window, watching the city lights blink like distant stars. In her hand was a manila envelope marked Cole Dillon, Reinstatement History, classified. She opened it, read it once, closed it, then reached for her phone. "Tell the board," she said. "If the principal won't act, I will." The sound of silence at Waverly Middle School was deafening. Not the peaceful kind, not the reverent hush of a library or the focused quiet of an exam room. No, this silence was different, thick with avoidance, swollen with secrets. It crept through the corridors like fog no one wanted to acknowledge. Claire Dawson walked through it like a ghost. She returned to her classroom each morning with her head high and her wounds hidden beneath makeup, but her eyes carried the truth. They scanned every student's face, some ashamed, some curious, and some like Blake Simmons, defiantly blank. Blake hadn't changed. He walked the halls like nothing had happened. His backpack swung over one shoulder, AirPods in swagger intact. If anything, the attention had emboldened him. No apology, no consequence, not even a detention. The official story, horseplay gone wrong. Principal Benson, ever the bureaucrat in pressed shirts and spineless smiles, had decided the hallway footage was inconclusive. The incident was labeled a disciplinary misunderstanding, and Blake was quietly reinstated to class without further inquiry. Claire could feel its students watching her every move, teachers offering empty nods in the hallway, and whispers that vanished the moment she entered a room. No one dared say it out loud, but she had become the cautionary tale. "I'm sorry, Claire. I really am," whispered Ms. Reynolds, stirring cream into her coffee. "But you know how it works around here. Politics, donations, parents on the school board." Claire didn't respond. She just stared down into her tea, letting the steam blur her vision. "Why don't you take more time off?" Reynolds continued gently. "You're still healing." No, Claire said quietly. If I leave now, he wins. Reynolds sighed. Then be careful. At 10:15 a.m., Claire returned from the copier to find a small envelope on her desk. No name, no handwriting. Inside was a folded note written in block letters. You should have stayed home. Some people don't get second chances. There was no signature. No student nearby looked suspicious. The cameras in this hallway conveniently had been marked under repair for 2 weeks. Claire didn't report the note. She didn't need to. She walked out into the hallway, her breath tight in her chest, and found Brady Cole standing just outside the door, arms crossed, eyes hard. I saw Blake near your room, he said. Claire forced a smile. I'm fine. You're not, Brady replied. He's trying to scare you. My dad says cowards try to silence people when the truth makes them nervous. Claire looked at him for a long moment, then knelt beside him. You're very brave, Brady. But promise me something. What don't fight his way. Fight your way with kindness, with truth. Brady didn't speak, but he nodded. And the next morning when Claire arrived, she found a small handmade card on her desk that read, Truth makes noise in quiet places. BC. She left it pinned to the whiteboard for everyone to see. Claire moved slowly through the corridor, her mind distracted, when she noticed something strange. Each morning since she returned, she had found a new thank you note tucked somewhere in her classroom. Sometimes under her eraser. Sometimes slipped into a drawer, always unsigned, always simple. Thank you for coming back. We see you even when others look away. One voice makes others brave. It wasn't just Brady anymore. She began to realize the shift, a ripple of quiet kindness, not loud, not dramatic, but present. Even students who had once giggled at Blake's cruelty now kept their heads down. A few whispered, Good morning, Miss Dawson, before scurrying to their seats. She was no longer the ghost. She was a symbol, and symbols don't flinch. Principal Benson stood at his desk, reviewing a copy of the hallway security footage that had somehow made its way online, just a 5-second clip, but enough. Blake raising the bat. Dylan's hand catching it mid-air. Claire collapsing. Dylan cradling her in his arms. Over 80,000 views in 2 days. No one knew who leaked it. But Benson had a good guess. He picked up his phone. Yes, Councilman Simmons, he said nervously. We're handling it. A pause. Yes? Yes, the guard has been reprimanded. No, he hasn't been fired. Yet. He hung up and rubbed his temples. The storm was building, and the roof was already leaking. Brady sat on the porch swing legs tucked under him, clutching a comic book he wasn't reading. Dylan stepped outside, a mug of coffee in his hand. You okay? He asked. Brady nodded slowly. Then, why doesn't anyone stop him? Dylan sat beside him. Because stopping someone powerful usually means losing something first. Brady looked up. Did you lose something? Dylan took a long sip. Yeah, he said. Finally. Peace. Brady was quiet for a moment, then said, Claire hasn't. Haven't what lost? She's still showing up. Dylan nodded. That's strength, too. A moment passed. Then Brady said, You're gonna help her, aren't you? Dylan looked at his son. I already did. No, Brady said softly. I mean really help her. Not with fists, with truth. Claire arrived to find her classroom door blocked not by students, but by flowers. Bouquets, hand-picked, wrapped in napkins and construction paper, taped to her door. Each one had a note. We're glad you came back. Thank you for being brave. Don't leave. We need you. Claire pressed a hand to her mouth, tears forming behind her eyes. Behind her she heard a voice. Some silences, Dylan said gently, are just waiting for someone to speak first. She turned to find him there holding one more bouquet. Nothing fancy, just wild daisies and a single white lily. They're from Brady, he said, but he told me to deliver them. Claire took the bouquet, holding it like a promise. Dylan hesitated, then added quietly, "There's more coming. Truth has a way of waking up the quiet." Claire smiled through her tears, and in that moment, the silence finally broke. It started with a rumor in the teacher's lounge. "Did you hear about the night guard?" whispered Mr. Harrow, the history teacher. "They say he used to be Navy SEAL, some kind of war hero." Claire Dawson paused mid-sip of her tea. Ms. Reynolds raised an eyebrow. "Seriously?" "Swear on my tenure," Harrow replied. "A friend of mine in the VA said he recognized the name. Dylan Cole. Said he vanished off the radar after a classified mission in Eastern Europe. Something big never made the news. Just gone." Claire set down her cup gently. The name had echoed in her mind for days. Dylan Cole. Not just the man who saved her life, but the one her mother had once mentioned in a broken whisper, as though saying it aloud could summon ghosts. That night, Claire sat on the edge of her bed in her small apartment laptop, open heart racing. She searched Dylan Cole plus SEAL plus mission. Nothing. She tried combinations. Navy SEAL Cole hostage rescue. Eastern Europe SEAL operation. Still nothing. But then, she tried a different path. She searched Beatrice Dawson hostage incident 2005, and there it was. A 3-line article buried in an archived military blog, American trade delegate rescued from terror attack. Unnamed U.S. Special Forces member reportedly injured during extraction. No further comment from Pentagon. There was a photo blurry taken from a distance, but in the background, Claire spotted him. Same profile, same long stride, same scar above the right brow. Dylan Cole. Her breath caught in her throat. He had saved her mother 20 years ago. And now, he had saved her. Claire stood in the doorway, her knuckles still tingling from knocking. Dylan looked up from a maintenance log, caught off guard. "Miss Dawson?" "I need 5 minutes," she said. He nodded, once stood up slowly, and gestured toward the hallway. They walked in silence, stopping near the old trophy case outside the gym, the one no one really looked at anymore. Claire turned to face him. "You were there," she said. "Eastern Europe, 2005. A trade delegation bombing." "My mother. She was the one you pulled from the wreckage." Dylan's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. "I found the article," Claire continued. "I saw the photo. It's you, isn't it?" Dylan exhaled. Long, slow, like he'd been holding it for years. "Yes." "Why didn't you tell anyone?" "Didn't see the point," he said. "She lived. That was enough." Claire studied him. "You were injured." He nodded. "Shrapnel. Broken ribs. Temporary blindness in one eye. I got out. Eventually. Why disappear?" Dylan's eyes drifted to the dusty trophy case. Some men come home. Others just stop running. There was a silence between them, then not awkward, not empty, but heavy with recognition. "I don't understand," Claire said quietly. "You saved my mother. You saved me. And you work here sweeping floors, fixing lights like none of it happened." He looked at her now fully. "I don't want medals," he said. "I want my son to grow up knowing that honor isn't in the uniform. It's in how you carry yourself when no one's watching." Claire blinked back, the sudden sting in her eyes. "You think no one's watching you, Dylan," she whispered. "We are." Beatrice Dawson sat in her private study staring at an old photograph long buried in a locked drawer. She'd carried it for 20 years. The image was grainy, taken just before the explosion, but his eyes were unmistakable. A field medic had snapped it on a whim. She had begged for a copy. Dylan Cole. She hadn't known his name at the time, only his bravery, only his silence, only the way he shielded her body with his bleeding from his own wounds. She had searched for years, hired investigators, reached out to military contacts, and then the trail went cold. Until now, her fingers traced the edge of the photograph, She thought of her daughter, bruised but brave. She thought of Claire's voice on the phone the night she came home from the hospital. "Mom, he's here. The man who saved you. His name is Dylan Cole." And she thought of the quiet man with tired eyes and calloused hands now working as a school guard, raising a son, protecting her daughter. Beatrice opened her laptop and began typing. Not an email, a letter, longhand, personal, meant to be delivered by hand, not screen. Classes had ended. Students gone. Sunlight spilled through the blinds in golden streaks. Claire sat grading papers when she heard a knock at the door. It wasn't a student. Dylan stood there holding a plain envelope. "It's from her," he said. "Your mother." Claire rose slowly and took it from his hands. "Did she ask you to give it to me?" "No," he said. "She asked me to read it." "You haven't. I couldn't." Claire hesitated. "Do you want me to?" He nodded once. She opened the letter, carefully unfolding the pages inside. Her mother's elegant handwriting filled the page. She read aloud. "Dylan, I searched for you. For years. Not because I wanted to thank you, though I do, but because I needed you to know something you saved more than my life. You gave me time I didn't deserve. And because of that, I had Claire. And now you've saved her too. I don't believe in coincidences. I believe in purpose. I believe you were meant to find her, to protect her. I've made many mistakes in my life. But today, I hope I can set one right. I owe you a debt no mother can repay. But perhaps we can begin again. Beatrice Dawson." Claire lowered the letter. Dylan stood still, eyes unreadable, but his hands just slightly were shaking. "She doesn't offer second chances," Claire said softly. "To anyone." "I didn't ask for one," Dylan replied. "I just didn't want her daughter to fall." Claire stepped closer. "You caught more than that," she said. "You caught the whole family." Dylan didn't respond. He didn't have to. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a shadow passing through someone else's world. He felt seen. The clink of porcelain echoed softly through the Dawson estate's vaulted sitting room as Claire set her untouched teacup down on the marble table. The room was all glass and silence, sunlight refracting off polished surfaces, soft classical music humming in the background. It was designed to impress guests, not comfort family. Beatrice Dawson, impeccably dressed in navy slacks and a silk blouse, sat across from her daughter, with a face carved from stone. The envelope that had carried her letter to Dylan sat between them now, opened, read, and emotionally disarming in a way neither woman had prepared for. Claire broke the silence. "You knew he was here. Working at my school. You didn't tell me." "I wasn't sure," Beatrice replied, voice controlled. "Not until I saw the footage. Not until I heard you say his name." Claire leaned forward, her voice soft but direct. "So you had him followed?" Beatrice didn't flinch. "I had him protected. That's not what you do for people," Claire said quietly. "That's what you do for assets." A sharp silence. Beatrice's lip twitched, but she quickly smoothed it. "Claire, this is not a man who fits easily into polite society. You don't know what he's done." "No," Claire shot back. "But I know what he didn't do. He didn't abandon you in that convoy. He didn't let Blake Simmons crush my skull. And he didn't ask for anything in return." Beatrice sat back, crossing her legs with a practiced grace. "That's the problem, darling. Men like him never ask. They just disappear. And when they finally resurface, it's because something, or someone, pulls them back into the fire." Claire stood now, pacing to the window, arms folded. When he looked at me, she said almost to herself, it wasn't pity. It wasn't anger. It was recognition. Like he knew what it felt like to be used, ignored, left behind. Beatrice rose slower, quieter. "He's dangerous, Claire." Claire turned. "So are you." Another silence. but this one cracked something deeper. Beatrice exhaled slowly and walked to a bookshelf near the corner of the room. From a hidden drawer beneath the lowest shelf, she retrieved a box, small, wooden, and worn. She handed it to Claire. Inside, a photo yellowed and torn at the edge. A young Beatrice in a torn suit, dirt on her face. A soldier standing beside her, one arm in a sling, his expression guarded, but oddly gentle. "I kept this," Beatrice said, her voice barely above a whisper. "All these years. And not a day went by I didn't wonder where he went. I had every intention of thanking him, of honoring him publicly. But then he vanished. The Pentagon stonewalled me. His name was redacted from every report." Claire studied the photo for a long time, the weight of it anchoring something in her chest. "You built a scholarship fund," Claire said finally, "for children of veterans." "Was that because of him?" Beatrice nodded. And now Claire asked, "Now that you know he's alive, that he's here?" Beatrice didn't answer. Claire took a breath. "Mom, you always said your fortune came from clarity, from making fast, unemotional decisions." Beatrice tilted her chin slightly. "Well, this one's emotional," Claire said. "And it's not yours to make." Brady Cole sat under the tall oak tree near the edge of the courtyard, scribbling something into a spiral notebook. His brows furrowed, lips moving slightly as he read to himself. Claire approached slowly, a thermos in one hand. "Thought you might need a refill," she said. Brady looked up, surprised. "You remember my coffee order? Cocoa with 2 marshmallows isn't hard to remember." She smiled. He grinned, then grew quiet. "Miss Dawson, do you think people can change even after they've been forgotten?" She sat beside him, watching the leaves sway in the soft breeze. "Yes," she said. "I think sometimes people disappear, not because they're weak, but because the world never made room for their strength." Brady nodded slowly. "My dad thinks no one will ever understand what he gave up," he said. "He doesn't say it, but I can tell." Claire looked at the boy, 12 years old, and already carrying the silence of a soldier's child. She reached into her satchel and pulled out the photo her mother had given her. "This is your father," she said. 20 years ago. He didn't just save my mom, he gave her a second chance. Which means I'm here. Because of him." Brady stared at the photo, lips parting in quiet awe. "Whoa," he whispered. "He looks the same. Just more tired." Claire smiled sadly. Tired men carry the most stories. Dylan sat at his workbench, hands covered in grease, repairing a jammed classroom window latch he'd pulled earlier that day. His focus was broken when he heard the soft knock. He turned. Beatrice Dawson stood at the threshold. No bodyguards, no chauffeur, just her. Dylan slowly wiped his hands on a rag. "Didn't think I'd see you again," he said flatly. "You saved my daughter," she replied. "I didn't do it for you." "I know," Beatrice said, stepping inside. "That's what makes it worse." Dylan tilted his head. "You've done more for this family without asking than most men do with an agenda. And I've treated you like a threat because I didn't know how to handle what you represent." "And what's that?" Dylan asked, eyes locked on hers. "A second chance I didn't earn," she said. For the first time, Dylan saw something real in her expression. Not the powerful matriarch, not the billionaire. Just a mother. A mother who had been saved and was now trying to repair a bridge that had never been built. She extended a small sealed envelope. Dylan didn't take it. "Claire and Brady. They're the ones who matter," he said. Beatrice nodded. "Which is why I'm starting over with them." She set the envelope down on his workbench and turned to leave. But before she stepped outside, she paused. "You once carried me out of fire," she said. "I hope now you'll let me stand beside you in the light." And then she was gone. The Waverly School Board convened once a month, usually with little fanfare. But this time, the parking lot was full by 6:30 p.m. SUVs idled outside the gymnasium-turned boardroom. Parents filed in wearing tight smiles and tighter jackets. Reporters loitered near the back doors. Several students, including Brady Cole, clutched hand-drawn signs that read, "Justice for Miss Dawson's safety. Donations, we see the truth." Inside, under the harsh hum of fluorescent lights, the board members sat in a row, like weary kings behind folding tables. Principal Benson stood beside them, hands clasped too tightly. Sweat beaded at his temple despite the cold. At the center of the first row sat Claire Dawson, spine straight bruise still faintly visible beneath her foundation. She wore a gray blazer, simple, clean, and unshakably composed. Beside her, uninvited but unmovable, sat Dylan Cole, not in uniform, but in a black-collared shirt and old jeans. One arm rested behind Brady, who sat silently with his hands in his lap, expression unreadable. At 7:02, the doors at the back swung open, and in walked Beatrice Dawson. No announcement, no flourish, just a quiet storm of silk and resolve. She strode to the front row and sat between Claire and Dylan. Principal Benson's eyes widened. One of the board members leaned in to whisper, "Is that?" "It is." Benson muttered, already regretting every decision of the last 2 weeks. And so given the circumstances, Benson droned, "We believe the matter regarding the student in question has been adequately addressed. There is no need to revisit disciplinary procedures, Mr. Benson." Claire interrupted, voice firm. "You're referring to an attempted assault that left me hospitalized for 3 days. A student with a history of aggression used a metal bat. You've called that adequately addressed." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Benson cleared his throat. "As previously stated, Miss Dawson, there were conflicting accounts." Another voice cut through. It was Beatrice. Would those be the same accounts that ignored the hallway security footage, viewed over 80,000 times online? Gasps. A few turned to stare. Benson stammered, "Mrs. Dawson, with all due respect." "Don't." Beatrice raised a hand. "If you're going to quote respect, let's begin by giving it to my daughter, and to every educator and student who walks these halls wondering if safety depends on privilege." Her voice was calm, but deadly accurate. The board member stiffened. She stood, reached into her bag, and pulled out a flash drive. "I've brought with me a copy of the original footage, unedited. I also have a formal deposition from 5 students who witnessed the incident and were never interviewed. And I have legal counsel ready to file a civil suit unless this board moves to reopen disciplinary procedures against Blake Simmons immediately." A beat of stunned silence, then murmurs. One board member leaned toward another. Another reached for a pen. Benson's voice cracked. "This is highly irregular." Dylan spoke for the first time. "No, Mr. Benson. What's irregular is watching a school protect the son of a politician while punishing the man who stopped him." All eyes turned to him. Dylan remained seated. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "I didn't step in that day to be a hero. I stepped in because no one else did." Brady turned to look at his father, his young face lit by quiet pride. "I've cleaned your halls, rewired your cameras, replaced your locks," Dylan continued. "But you didn't know my name until a video went viral. That says more about your priorities than mine." Another ripple through the audience. Beatrice turned to the board. "I'm also prepared to withdraw all future donations to Waverly unless Claire is publicly cleared and proper action is taken." And in addition, she pulled out a second document. "I've purchased the vacant property adjacent to the school. I intend to build a nonprofit mentorship center for at-risk youth, and I'm inviting Mr. Cole to serve as its inaugural director." Gasps. Journalists typed feverishly. Benson sat down. Hard. Flashbulbs popped as the crowd exited the gym. Claire stepped into the night air, lungs aching with adrenaline. She pulled her coat tighter, her mind still spinning. "Are you all right?" Dylan asked quietly. Claire nodded slowly. "I don't know what just happened." "You stood up," he said. "And people stood with you." Brady caught up, breathless. Mom, I mean Miss Dawson. That was awesome. Did you see their faces? Claire laughed, her tension finally breaking. You were amazing too, Brady. Beatrice approached, her expression unreadable. Claire hesitated. Beatrice reached out and gently straightened the collar of Claire's coat, something she hadn't done since Claire was a teenager. You were magnificent, she whispered. Not alone, Claire replied. She turned to Dylan. You weren't just my shield that day, she said softly. You've been my anchor. Dylan didn't speak. He just offered her a slight, knowing nod. Sometimes silence was the loudest form of truth. Inside a wood-paneled room thick with cigar smoke and legal folders, Blake Simmons' father slammed his phone down. Pull him out of Waverly, he barked to his assistant. Now, we're done playing nice. But somewhere deep inside, even he knew the tide had shifted. The story broke wide at dawn. By 8:03 a.m., the video clip of Claire Dawson's attack had already been replayed on 4 major morning shows. By 8:14, Beatrice Dawson's press conference was trending on social media under hashtags like Sanchuant, protect our teachers, Zantuash, justice for Claire, and Buahabash Tuais Dylan Cole. And by 8:30, the media trucks began lining up outside Waverly Middle School's iron gates. It wasn't just a school story anymore. It was a national headline. Cameras flashed. Reporters jostled. A sea of microphones pointed at a sleek gray podium now owned by Beatrice Dawson. She didn't shout. She didn't flinch. She simply stood in her dark trench coat, her silver hair tucked neatly into a bun, and delivered her statement with a voice like a scalpel. My daughter was nearly killed in a hallway where no one raised their voice until a janitor with a past stepped in and did what the system refused to do, protect the innocent. That janitor, Mr. Dylan Cole, is a decorated veteran, a man who saved not only my life 2 decades ago in a war zone, but saved my daughter's last week in a public school built with my tax dollars. And you made him invisible. Well, he's invisible no more. As of today, my legal team has filed for a formal review of the Waverly School Board's decision not to discipline the student involved in this attack. We are also pursuing charges for attempted assault and negligence. Let this serve as notice. When institutions protect the powerful at the expense of the innocent, it is no longer a mistake. It is complicity. No one dared interrupt her. Not even the seasoned anchors sent to calm the narrative. Behind her stood Claire, tall, resolute, and Dylan silent in a dark green jacket with no insignia, his expression calm but unmovable. The crowd erupted in applause. Not a cheer. Applause. Like a courtroom that had heard the truth for the first time. The walls of Principal Benson's office once bore college pennants and motivational posters. Now they pulsed with the glow of muted television screens, each showing a different news outlet, all covering the same story. His name, his school, his failure. He sat behind his desk, trembling fingers gripping a cup of bitter coffee. I told them not to poke the Dawson family, he muttered. The assistant principal hovered awkwardly by the door. Sir, there's a media request for comment. Benson looked up, pale. Tell them I'm on leave, he snapped. Effective immediately. He knew the end when he saw it. And this was it. For the first time in years, Beatrice Dawson's staff saw something strange. Their employer wasn't hosting a gala, wasn't traveling to Geneva, wasn't consulting for the UN or finalizing a billion-dollar merger. She was in the living room kneeling beside a child. Brady Cole sat cross-legged on the Persian rug, holding a legal-sized drawing pad. Crayons scattered around him. What's that? Beatrice asked, genuinely curious. It's a logo for your mentorship center, he said shyly. Claire said you're building one. Beatrice blinked, caught off guard. The logo was a simple outline of 2 hands, one small one, large, connected by a white chalk line like the arc of a smile. Below, in wobbly cursive, the Haven Project, where courage meets kindness. Beatrice swallowed hard. It was better than anything her design team could have billed 6 figures for. Brady looked up. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why do people like Blake still get away with it?" Beatrice's jaw tightened. She sat beside him. "Because systems are built to protect themselves first," she said. "But systems can change, especially when enough people care." "Do you care?" Beatrice smiled faintly. "I didn't. Not enough. Until now." Brady nodded. "Good. 'Cause my dad says people who care quietly are the ones who change the loudest things." The porch light flickered softly as dusk fell over the quiet neighborhood. Dylan sat in a wooden chair, his boots propped up on the railing, a thick manila envelope in his lap. Beatrice had left it for him after the press conference. Inside. Full documentation of the scholarship fund. She started in his name. Proof of his seal discharge now cleared of all redactions. A notarized offer naming him Director of Security and Mentorship at the New Haven Project, and a handwritten letter. Dylan, you once vanished into fire to save a stranger. Now you're walking through it again to protect your son, my daughter, and a school that didn't deserve you. This is not payment. It's acknowledgement. You matter. You always did. Beatrice. He didn't cry, but he sat in silence for a long time. The hallways of Waverly were different now. Students didn't avoid Claire anymore. They smiled, waved, even whispered, "Thank you." A bulletin board appeared near the entrance titled, "Voices of Courage." Anonymous student letters began to flood it. "Thank you for not giving up. I used to be afraid to say something. Now I'm not. My mom said she cried when she saw you on TV. So did I." That afternoon, as Claire walked to her classroom, she found Dylan waiting at the door. He held a sheet of paper in his hand. "What's that?" she asked. "It's from Brady. He said I had to give it to you personally." She unfolded it. "Dear Miss Dawson, I think you and my dad are like bookends. You both hold things up. You both make space for people to stand between you and feel safe. Don't let the shelf fall. Love, Brady." Claire smiled through the tears forming in her eyes. "You two are going to break me," she whispered. Dylan gave a soft chuckle. "No," he said. "We're here to build you." The school auditorium had never been this full. Rows of metal folding chairs stretched from wall to wall, occupied by teachers, parents, reporters, and a silent student body. Even the overhead lights seemed more alert, casting a pale glow over the tension that hovered like mist. At the front, the school board members sat stiffly behind a long table, microphones ready, legal counsel visible in the wings. In the center of it all stood Claire Dawson, summoned for a public hearing to clarify the nature of the recent incident involving student Blake Simmons. Not justice. Optics. The superintendent had called it a necessary rebalancing of the narrative. Everyone else called it damage control. Claire adjusted the microphone in front of her and began calm but clear. "I was attacked in the hallway by a student who had made previous threats. This is not a misunderstanding. This is a failure of policy, of accountability, and of moral courage." The audience stirred. Principal Benson shifted uncomfortably. A board member leaned into his mic. "Ms. Dawson, while we respect your emotional perspective, we're looking for—" "She's not emotional," said a small voice from the front row. "She's telling the truth." Heads turned. All eyes landed on a boy in a navy sweater and glasses seated beside a man in a faded green jacket. Brady Cole stood. He was small, quiet, polite, the kind of student who rarely raised his hand, let alone his voice. But now his fingers clutched a folded paper. His cheeks were red. His legs trembled slightly. The board hesitated. "Excuse me, young man," the chairwoman asked. Brady cleared his throat. "I wrote a statement. I was there. I saw everything." Claire turned to look at him, eyes wide. She hadn't known. Dylan didn't stop him. He just gave a slow nod. Permission? Protection. Brady stepped forward. Silence fell. He reached the podium and opened the page. My name is Brady Cole. I'm 12 years old. I sit in the second row, third seat in Miss Dawson's class. She's my favorite teacher. A few people chuckled gently. He continued. On the day she got hurt, I was walking to class. I saw Blake Simmons blocking her path. I saw him yelling. I saw her ask him to step away. He paused, swallowed. Then I saw him pull a bat from his gym bag, and he raised it. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The board members exchanged looks. Brady's voice wavered, but he pressed on. I tried to say something, but I couldn't move. I was scared. Then my dad, Dylan Cole, stepped in. He caught the bat. He stopped Blake. He saved Miss Dawson. If he hadn't been there, I think she might have died. Someone in the audience sobbed. Claire pressed a hand to her lips. Brady folded. His note looked up and said, "The quiet truth no adult had dared. Why are you protecting Blake? Why are you punishing the people who helped?" The board chair blinked. "I'm just a kid," Brady added. "But if I can see what's right, why can't you?" He turned away from the mic, hands shaking. Dylan met him at the bottom of the steps and pulled him into a quiet hug. One hand cupped the back of Brady's head. Not a word was spoken between them. They didn't need any. The silence after Brady's testimony was deafening. Then came the applause. Not polite clapping. Not curated social theater. Real thunderous shaking applause. From teachers. From parents. From other kids. Even one board member reluctantly joined in. Claire found Brady near the front doors, seated on the floor beside Dylan. She crouched down and touched his shoulder gently. "Brady," she whispered, "you didn't have to do that." "I know," he said, "but I wanted to. You told me to fight with truth." "Right." She smiled through the tears in her eyes. "You spoke more truth in 3 minutes than most adults do in a lifetime." He leaned into her slightly, and for a brief moment, she felt like she had just been protected by a child. By courage. The clip of Brady's speech went viral. Thousands of shares, dozens of think pieces. One headline read, "The 12-year-old who made a school listen." Another, "Bravery isn't always loud. Sometimes it's 4'11" and wears glasses." Underneath photos surfaced of Claire holding Brady's hand, Dylan standing nearby his face, partly in shadow but unmistakably strong. Councilman Simmons hurled his phone across the room. "Get him out of Waverly," he barked at his aide again. "Transfer Blake immediately. New state, new district. Scrub the record." But it was too late. The footage. The truth. The kid. They couldn't bury it now. The knock at the door was soft. When she opened it, Dylan stood there holding a grocery bag in one hand. "Brady wanted to bring you something," he said. "Hot cocoa and his homemade victory muffins. He said they only work if you eat them warm." Claire stepped aside, laughing. "Get in here before they cool down." They sat on the couch, cocoa steaming between them. The TV played a muted newscast of Brady's testimony. "He's going to be someone important," Claire said. "He already is," Dylan replied. A pause. "Thank you," she said, "for raising him like that." Dylan looked at her, and for the first time the calm in his eyes gave way to something vulnerable. "I'm trying," he said. "He's the only thing I've ever gotten truly right." Claire hesitated, then touched his hand lightly. "You've gotten more right than you think." They sat there, silence warm and comforting. Two people bound not by romance, yet but something deeper. Shared truth. Shared battle. Shared healing. The world didn't spin any faster the next morning. There were no parades, no headlines screaming change. The sun rose over Waverly as it always did, dimmed slightly by the clouds of early spring, soft light dripping through trees that hadn't yet bloomed. But inside Claire Dawson's classroom, something was different. The bulletin board titled "Voices of Courage" was now overflowing. Students had begun pinning notes to each other, not just to her. Thank yous, apologies, confessions. Someone had even tacked up a poem that ended with the line, "If truth is a seed, then kindness is the rain." Claire stood quietly at the back of the room, fingers lightly brushing the edge of the board, her eyes misting. Then she noticed the small envelope taped to her desk. No name. Inside, a single folded note-lined paper block, letters in pencil. "Thank you for not disappearing." She read it twice and smiled. The day had moved slowly but peacefully. No confrontations, no whispered threats. Just life moving on. Claire exited the building just past Four Coat tucked under one arm, papers stacked under the other. She froze as she reached the curb. Dylan stood by his truck, holding something in his hands. It wasn't a tool or a clipboard. It was a letter. She walked toward him cautiously, heart quickening not out of fear, but anticipation. A sense that something important was hanging in the air. He turned as she approached. "I was going to leave this," he said quietly. "Didn't want to make it a moment." She raised an eyebrow. "But you stayed." He looked down. Brady said, "Moments don't wait." Claire smiled softly. He's right. Dylan handed her the envelope. It was thick, a little weathered, the kind that had been folded and unfolded too many times. She opened it slowly. Inside was a letter not from Dylan, from Beatrice. A letter written 20 years ago. Dylan spoke before she could read. She wrote it the week after the convoy attack. Said the hospital wouldn't let her send it until they found out who I was. By the time they did, I was gone. Claire glanced up, stunned. "You kept it all this time?" He nodded. It was the only thing that reminded me someone remembered. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. "To the man who gave me breath, when I thought I'd lost it, I don't know your name. I don't know your past, but I know your courage. I know your silence. I know your sacrifice. You shielded me when no one else could. You bled so I wouldn't. You disappeared before I could say the only thing that mattered. Thank you. Wherever you go, please carry that with you. Because you gave me more than safety. You gave me a future. And one day, I hope you'll see what you saved. Beatrice Dawson." Claire folded the letter slowly, her chest rising and falling with quiet emotion. Dylan looked at her, voice low. "I didn't know that future would include you." Claire stepped closer. I didn't know someone could carry so much, and still stand so tall. Their eyes met. No heat, no rush, just a shared, worn-out warmth between two people who had seen enough to know what mattered. "Brady asked me yesterday. Claire said if people like you ever rest." "And what did you say?" Dylan asked. She smiled. "I told him, only when they're reminded they're human." Dylan chuckled softly, gaze dropping for a moment. "I forget sometimes." Claire reached out and gently touched his hand. "Then let me remind you." Beatrice was alone in her study, sipping tea and watching the late news with the sound off. The screen showed a still photo of Brady standing at the school board podium, and below it, a new Chiron district launches internal review following testimony by student witness. A quiet knock broke her focus. Claire stepped in. "I gave him the letter," she said softly. Beatrice's eyes softened. "I never thought he'd read it," Beatrice admitted, "let alone keep it." Claire stepped further into the room, then reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a second piece of paper. She laid it gently on the table. Brady's drawing of the Haven Project logo. Beatrice picked it up, studied it in silence. "You still planning to open it?" Claire asked. Beatrice looked up. "Yes, but I want it to be more than my redemption." Claire nodded. "Then make it his legacy. Both of them." Beatrice smiled faintly, emotion breaking through her polished facade. "They already are." The living room was dim lit only by the soft glow of the TV. Brady lay curled up on the couch, head resting on a pillow, a blanket pulled to his chin. Dylan sat nearby in his armchair, flipping slowly through a photo album he hadn't opened in years. Photos of Brady as a toddler, of his wife now long gone, of a man Dylan barely recognized, clean-shaven, uniformed eyes, sharper and colder. He paused on one photo, Brady sitting on his shoulders at a 4th of July parade, giggling face painted like a tiger. He smiled. The door creaked. Claire appeared holding 2 cups of cocoa. "You left this in my classroom again?" she teased. "You forget what home it belongs to." Dylan set the album aside and gestured toward the couch. He fell asleep waiting for the news segment. Claire walked over, set the cocoa down, and sat quietly beside Dylan. They didn't speak for a while. Then she whispered, "You ever get tired of saving people?" Dylan looked at her eyes soft. "Only until they start saving me back." Claire reached for his hand beneath the blanket. And just like that, quiet became warmth, stillness became safety. And for the first time in years, Dylan Cole allowed himself to feel something deeper than duty. Something like peace. Spring came slowly to Waverly that year. Not with grand announcements or fireworks, but with small signs, crocuses pushing through cracks in the sidewalk, birds nesting beneath the eaves of the gym, and students, formerly strangers, sitting side by side in the lunchroom exchanging shy smiles and homemade cookies. Something had shifted, not just because of headlines or hashtags, but because a boy had stood up, and a woman had refused to sit down, and a quiet man who cleaned the halls had shown the world what a protector truly looked like. And now the world was watching what they would do next. A crowd gathered on the empty lot beside Waverly Middle School, once overgrown with weeds and forgotten metal fencing. The space now buzzed with energy balloons tied to folding chairs, posters, pinned to temporary scaffolding, a podium erected at center stage. A large banner flapped in the breeze behind it. The Haven Project, where courage meets kindness. Claire stood near the podium, watching the final preparations, with a mixture of awe and disbelief. She wore a soft blue dress and a pin on her lapel that read, "Educator, Survivor, Advocate." Brady stood at her side, tie-crooked hair combed fiercely to one side. He clutched a stack of note cards in his hand, like they were made of glass. Still nervous, she asked gently. He nodded. "What if I mess up my line?" Claire leaned down, whispered, "Then you'll smile, take a deep breath, and say it again. You've already done the hard part, Brady. Today is just gratitude." Behind them, Dylan adjusted the collar of his new polo shirt, the one with Haven's staff stitched in simple embroidery. He looked out across the crowd, parents, teachers, reporters, city officials. But it wasn't the size of the audience that struck him. It was the feeling. He wasn't invisible anymore. He was part of something. Beatrice Dawson took the podium first. Her voice was calm, her eyes soft. No suit jacket today, just a simple gray blouse, and her reading glasses on a silver chain. 6 weeks ago, she began. This lot was nothing but gravel and regret. The land had been in foreclosure for years. The school didn't have the funds to buy it. The city didn't see a need. She paused, glancing toward Dylan and Claire, and then one act of courage, followed by another, and another, turned silence into movement. The crowd applauded. "I built this project in honor of 2 people," she continued. "One who saved my life, and one who reminded me how to live it." She gestured behind her. "And now I'm proud to introduce the director of the Haven Project, Mr. Dylan Cole." Applause thundered across the lot. Dylan stepped forward, modest and calm, wearing that quiet strength that never needed volume. He took the mic, adjusted it once. "I'm not used to giving speeches," he began, "but I am used to building things." Laughter rippled gently. "I built trust with my son, one breakfast at a time. I built peace with my past, one silent shift at a time. And now, I want to help build something that outlives us all. He looked at Claire. At the Haven, we won't just teach kids how to be brave. We'll show them what it looks like. He stepped back. He didn't need to say more. Brady approached the mic, neck still clutching his cards, but now with a quiet smile. He adjusted the height like he'd practiced a dozen times in front of his bathroom mirror. "My name is Brady Cole," he said, "and I used to be scared of saying things that mattered." A hush fell, but one day I watched someone stand between danger and my teacher. And then I watched my teacher come back to school with a bruise on her face and strength in her voice. And then I stopped being afraid. He held up a single card, the last one. And now we're going to help more kids stop being afraid too. The applause came slowly at first, then it swelled. Parents rose to their feet. Some wiped tears. Even the mayor clapped with both hands. Dylan blinked hard. Claire reached for his hand and gave it a quiet squeeze. Blueprints covered the folding table. Open concept classrooms, a tech lab, an outdoor learning garden. A small memorial wall titled "The Wall of the Brave," set to include student art veteran quotes and letters of courage. Claire traced her finger along the floor plan, stopping at the side labeled Room 3A Dawson Literacy Lab. She glanced at Beatrice. "You named a room after me." Beatrice smirked. "I had to. You wouldn't take the whole building." Claire looked over at Dylan's corner office label Cole Leadership Center. "Did he argue?" Claire asked. "Oh, endlessly," Beatrice said. "I won." Claire laughed. "Of course you did." It was quiet again. No reporters. No protests. Just the smell of chicken roasting in the oven and a faint jazz record spinning on the old player Dylan had repaired 2 nights ago. Claire sat on the couch, legs curled under her, sipping tea. Dylan sat beside her, flipping through a binder of student applications for the Haven. Brady was asleep in the other room, his head on a stack of comic books. Claire leaned her head against Dylan's shoulder. "I still don't understand how we got here," she said softly. "Me neither," he replied. "But I'm not going back." She looked up at him. "Back to what?" "To being invisible." Claire's eyes shimmered, and she rested her palm over his heart. "Good," she whispered. "Because you were never meant to hide." Outside the window, the streetlight flickered on. Inside, a family bound not by blood, but by healing shared the kind of quiet that only comes after a storm. It was the kind of morning that made you believe in second chances. The breeze was soft, birds flitted between young trees, and the rising sun bathed the glass windows of the newly finished Haven Project building in golden light. Inside, the final preparations for the dedication ceremony were underway. There were no banners, no red carpets, just rows of folding chairs set up in the courtyard, handwritten programs on each seat, and a string quartet tuning quietly beneath an oak tree. But there was something sacred about the air that morning, as if the very soil remembered everything it had taken to make this place possible. Claire stood in front of a narrow mirror in the staff room, adjusting the pendant around her neck. It wasn't fancy, just a simple silver circle engraved with 2 words, "Still Standing." Beatrice had given it to her last night after dinner. No speech, just a nod and a quiet hand over hers. Now Claire smoothed the crease in her dress and turned as the door opened. Dylan entered wearing a navy shirt and slacks that Brady had picked out. His long hair was tied neatly, and in his hand was a small, carefully folded American flag. "It's from my locker," he said, holding it out. "Carried it through 3 deployments. Figured today it ought to fly somewhere better." Claire took at her throat tight. "You sure I'm not a soldier anymore?" he said. "But this place, we built it with the same honor." She nodded, then smiled. "You clean up well, Mr. Cole." He grinned. "Don't get used to it." The crowd settled as the quartet played a soft arrangement of "What a Wonderful World." Brady took the stage first this time, in a blazer 2 sizes too big, but confidence that fit just fine. He tapped the mic once. "Welcome to the grand opening of the Haven Project. My name is Brady Cole, and I used to be afraid to speak. But today, I get to say thank you to my teacher, to my dad, and to all of you, for building a place where kids like me get to grow without fear." Applause filled the courtyard. Claire followed, stepping up with grace and poise. "This center is more than a building. It's a promise," she said, "that when we choose kindness over silence, when we honor the ones who stand quietly in the back, we change the world." She turned slightly, her voice softening. "Today we dedicate this space not just to hope, but to those who lived it out loud." After the speeches, the guests were invited inside to tour the new facility. Near the front lobby was the Wall of the Brave, a curved panel featuring etched names, photos, and handwritten quotes from students, veterans, teachers, and community members who had shaped the journey. In the center of the wall, under soft lighting, was a framed letter. It was Beatrice's letter, the one she had written to Dylan 20 years ago. Now, laminated and centered above the caption, "He gave us breath. We gave him purpose." Beside it, a photograph of Dylan holding Claire in his arms in that infamous hallway, frozen in the moment he caught her. And below it, a new plaque, "Dylan Cole Protector. Father, builder of safe havens." Later that afternoon, as the guests mingled and music filled the halls, Claire found her mother standing near the memorial wall. Beatrice was silent, one gloved hand, brushing the glass casing of the letter she had once tucked away in a drawer. Claire stepped beside her. "You okay?" she asked. Beatrice nodded slowly. For the first time in a long while, "Yes." They stood there a moment longer. Then Beatrice said, "You made something beautiful, Claire. We all did." Beatrice looked at her daughter, the woman she'd once tried to protect by controlling. Now she was watching her lead by letting go. "I never said it properly," she murmured, "but thank you. For surviving. For staying. For forgiving me." Claire smiled. "Thank you," she replied. "For showing up." They didn't hug. They didn't need to. But for the first time, they were standing side by side as equals. Later, long after the last guest had left, and the final light had faded from the courtyard, Dylan and Claire sat together on the wooden bench outside the Haven building. Brady was chasing fireflies nearby, his laughter echoing across the open grass. Claire leaned against Dylan's shoulder. "You ever think you'd be here?" she asked. "No," he said softly. "But I think I always hoped." She reached for his hand. They watched as Brady captured a firefly in his palms, holding it like a secret. Claire whispered, "Do you think this place will last?" Dylan turned to her. "It already has," he said. "Because it started with a girl who stood up to a bully, a boy who found his voice, a mother who fought like hell, and a man who stopped hiding." She looked at him, into him. "You're not invisible anymore, Dylan." He nodded slowly. "And you're not alone." They sat in silence as the stars began to appear one by one. And for the first time, everything felt complete. Not perfect, not without scars, but whole, a circle closed. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? It's been such a joy to see viewers from all over join us for these stories of courage, kindness, and second chances. Feel free to share in the comments. We read everyone. If this story touched your heart, we invite you to subscribe to Soul Moment Stories for more inspiring tales just like this one. And if you think someone you care about needs to hear this story, feel free to share it with them. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. From our family to yours, stay kind, stay strong, and we'll see you in the next story.